Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. It's your host, Matt Zahab. We are buzzing as always, and I'm super pumped to have one of the OGs, one of the true GOATs on the show today. We have Anurag Arjun, co-founder of Avail, who is a seasoned entrepreneur who has founded several successful startups across diverse industries, ranging from cash flow lending to regulatory tech. You may have heard his first company that he founded back in 2017. Maybe you heard it, maybe you didn't. It's called Matic Network, Polygon. Oh yeah, founded Polygon, not a big deal, which is a platform for scaling Ethereum. Today, he is spearheading the development of Avail, an innovative solution within the Polygon ecosystem that empowers developers to create fast, efficient, and scalable applications. As a pioneer with a background spanning research, economics, engineering, and a little bit of everything, he's done it all, worked in a hell of a lot in the blockchain industry, and embarks on a journey to empower rollup and application blockchain communities with the development of a unification layer that enables modular execution layers to scale and interoperate in a trust minimized way. Super pumped to get into this. Anurag, welcome to the show, my friend. Super pumped to have you on. How you doing this lovely evening?
Yep. Thank you. Good to see you, Matt, and great to be on the show.
Thanks for coming on, mate. Much appreciated. Know you're a busy guy here. Let's jump right back into 2017. You co-founded Matic. I'm a big Matic fan, big Polygon guy. Not just because I hold a little bag, but I love what you and the team, full disclosure, I don't know full to this day how involved you are with Matic. We'll get into that. But regardless, I love the community, love the team. And it's incredible that you and Sandeep and the other founders made this happen. What a cool story. Let's go back to 2017 here. Any interesting stories on your end? Cool stories, memorable, interesting stories from the founding days of Polygon and or Matic? Was there one or two that stick out in particular that that you'd have to tell if you were at a fireside chat or something of the like?
Yeah, I mean, of course, lots of stories to say, but in general, like back in 2017 when we started Matic, or as Polygon at the moment, it wasn't as big as Polygon is at the moment, right? Like we just started with just the three of us back in 2017. This is JD or Jayanti, me and Sandeep. So we started off in a co-working space in the city called Mumbai in India. And no one really knew us. Like the industry was of course much smaller, but we were just this small Indian team coming out of nowhere really. And actually this is, before 2017 I had mostly worked in more traditional fintech and regulated tech sort of backgrounds in product and engineering. But this was around the time that Ethereum was going through its first scaling issues. I don't know if people remember, but there was this thing called CryptoKitties that kind of created a lot of congestion on Ethereum. And 2017 was also the year in which there was this paper on Plasma that came out for scaling Ethereum. And so I met actually Jayanti or JD, or as he's known as, which is the another co-founder of Polygon. And at the time, actually, I was working on this other cash flow lending startup. But JD convinced me to join. So I mean, I knew a little bit about blockchain. I had dabbled with it primarily because fintech clients, especially like a certain central bank wanted to experiment with blockchains, and so I had looked into it, but I had not gone deep into it. But when JD told me that he was going to do this, and so I actually kind of I remember reading the Mastering Bitcoin book in probably one night. So, and then it's just that was kind of the pivotal moment for me specifically to kind of chuck whatever I was doing and go down the rabbit hole in crypto, because Bitcoin was just the beginning. Ethereum, there was just so much to go down the rabbit hole that it just sucked me in. And whatever I was doing, I just dropped that because I thought crypto or blockchains could make a much bigger impact with building out this technology. So that's where we started. Of course, very interesting stories. I mean, up until 2019, we didn't really have too much money to kind of run operations. Like no major VCs funded us. We actually struggled for fundings till like we kind of listed. We did like an IEO on Binance in
Yeah.
2019. So the 2 years in between was a big struggle. It was also like a very bad bear cycle at the time.
Yeah.
I remember like Bitcoin going to 3,000, which like I think.
Crazy to think about.
So yeah, it was a really tough initial couple of years when we kind of we were just building and with a very small team. But yeah, I mean this right, like I mean you have to go through fire to like make
Yeah.
something really
Bingo.
big. So
Yeah.
so yeah, of course, lots of interesting things at the time. But yeah, these are some of the things.
I love it. I gotta ask, and this is again, this is more for me. This is just a strictly selfish curiosity question here. Why name the token Matic and the blockchain Polygon?
Oh
I
no. So yeah, I mean, see,
curious.
the thing is that of course we were known when we founded Polygon. It was called as Matic Network. So that is when how we really began. And when the like the IO was came there, and even when Polygon POS, which is known, that was the main chain that we were working on. Even that has had the Matic token. And then we kind of did a rebrand to Polygon in 2020, 2020, end of 2020. That was when we had moved beyond the POS chain itself. Like we took on more products. We already started crafting some of the ZK strategy at the time. Then we went on to acquire these teams like Hermes, Zero, Maiden, for example, and so on. But we also had, like Avail, which I'm right now working on. We actually started out in 2020. So Matic was primarily known for the like the chain, the POS chain that we ran, and it is kind of a historical artifact that the token is called Matic because it would be having too much of a hassle to change the name of
Mm,
the token because it was already listed on exchanges and stuff. Of course, recently, like the team has done this migration from the Matic token to the Pole token, which is underway at the moment. So that's why now the new token is called POL Pole instead of Matic. But yeah, purely the rebrand was because we wanted to attempt a much bigger product suite,
yeah.
and Matic was very strongly correlated to the POS chain. But I mean, in retrospective, like the POS chain as now Polygon POS. It's just the in the network, the tokens still known as Matic, but yeah, we kind of did that whole rebrand thing. Yeah.
Smart. And that's on me. I should have done my research here. If I would have known that it was originally Matic, I wouldn't have asked. But c'est la vie. Now we have the answer. Thank you, my friend. Let's jump into Avail here. Why Avail? Why not just sort of do this as part of Polygon slash Matic? Like, you got to give me that backstory. So curious. Why not jump ship, but why start sort of a new tentacle or arm of Matic slash Polygon to create the sort of unification layer that is truly needed?
Yeah, so I mean, just to give you a backdrop and to answer this question, so Avail actually was started within Polygon back in late 2020. So this is when we had delivered the POS chain and we were, kind of crafting the ZK strategy and stuff like that. And to give context, like we started work as on Plasma back in 2017, and Plasma was one of the first solutions to scale Ethereum. It was an off-chain scaling solution, and it was this off-chain execution and off-chain data availability component. And so ultimately, of course, Plasma didn't pan out, and we kind of shifted gears to the POS chain. But we always wanted to build this off-chain scaling solution for like, and of course after Plasma, rollups came, and rollups was deemed to be the more correct construction for off-chain scaling solutions, and we of course pivoted to that. But once you consider Plasma or rollups, and during our work with Plasma, it became increasingly clear that data availability was a problem that needs to be solved. I mean, any kind of off-chain scaling solution, especially rollups, need to have like huge amounts of data availability throughput, but also very easy ways to verify that. And so if you look at back in 2020, Ethereum also moved, like released something called the rollup centric roadmap. This is in 2019, 2020. Also, if you kind of remember, Ethereum was on this execution sharding roadmap, and then they removed all those elements and moved to a more rollup centric roadmap, which would, have more support for data availability throughput on Ethereum itself.
Mm.
And so slowly, I came to the realization that the way in which we construct blockchains was going to change pretty massively, because like if you look before rollups, the way blockchains were constructed were different sorts of L1s. So initially you had Ethereum as the first general purpose blockchain, but then you had a slew of faster EVM blockchains, or EVM blockchains with bigger blocks, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like other variants of VMs. So something like EOS or Phantom or BSC or in Solana that came in later, for example, and so on. So these were all ways of doing blockchains. But each time someone wanted to do a blockchain, they had to kind of bootstrap a validator set, create a new token, for example, make ensure
Yeah.
the token is valuable so that it has the blockchain has enough cryptoeconomic security and so on. And really, rollups really opened up that possibility to just have one base layer and then have an unlimited number of rollups built on top, and they can share the cryptographic security of the base layer. And so you can now remove that cryptographic security bootstrapping element. And so that's why rollups are also really rollups are really blockchains. Like they're just separate blockchains, but in general, the construct is such that they are able to inherit security from the base layer. So what I understood very early back in 2020 was that the whole way in which we see new blockchains being created is going to change. Every new blockchain is mostly going to be a rollup. And we are already seeing that, right? Like, over the last 3-4 years, many rollup stacks have been in development and have been
Very
on
true.
production. And
Yeah.
now, if you see some on, let's say, L2 beat, there are probably 100 rollups being listed, and that's not even a complete list.
Yeah.
If you look at like someone like Base did not spend too much time on blockchain development. It just kind of took Optimism's code stack, the OP stack, and then created a chain. And they focus on the things that really matter, things like
Yeah.
GTM, things like user acquisition, and so on. And they have been pretty successful. And that's what's going to happen, right? Like no one is going to kind of really build a blockchain from scratch unless you really need to. There's going to be more and more new blockchains debuting as rollups. And these rollups need not necessarily be EVM rollups. The beauty of the rollup construct is that these can be anything. It can be, like Move rollups, it can be Cairo rollups, it can be rollups with custom state machines and whatever, right? Like so I knew like we realized back in 2020 that this is going to happen, and you would need infrastructure to power this rollup centric future. And that's the real idea of Avail. What infrastructure would be required to power this rollup centric future? And that is what we really build at Avail.
So 2020, back in the day, you and the team saw, and one of my favorite things about this podcast that I'm so grateful for is the amount of people like yourselves, the incredible founders, C-suite execs that come on the pod and teach me about pattern recognition. I think pattern recognition is one of the most useful and underappreciated skills in life, and literally can open up the doors to generational wealth. You guys found a pattern, you recognized it, and farmed your thesis, framed your thesis, and now you're getting after it and attacking it. In 2020, you knew that the future of blockchains would not be L1s. A lot of people probably would have said L1s would still be the thing. You said it was all L2s and rollups back in 2020. What made you come to that? How did you know that this would be the future back in the day?
So basically, like if you kind of look at the typical L1 blockchain, right? Like, so I'll divide the architecture of a L1 blockchain into two parts. So one is the actual VM, or the application development, like the operating system, sort of the VM in general, which is like in Ethereum's case, it's the EVM, for example, and so on. And then there's this underlying component, which is the consensus part, the cryptoeconomic security part, and so on. So these two are very different. And in general, like the rollup construct allows you to separate these out, because that's what we were really doing with Plasma and rollups. We were trying to utilize the security of Ethereum to kind of build these off-chain scaling solutions. We didn't want to make Ethereum blocks bigger or the block times lower. We wanted to create off-chain systems that would handle a bunch of transactions and then provide this proof back to Ethereum, right? Like, and so essentially that was what we were working on day in day out, right? Like, so when you kind of work on these problems, you realize that, like, if you kind of look at L1s, right? Like, we tend to talk about very successful L1s mostly, but if you look at the list of not that great or L1s that have not done that great. For example, if you look at the Cosmos ecosystem, there are a few projects that have done pretty well, but a lot of the ecosystem is littered with L1 chains which can't even pay enough for cryptographic security for their validator set. And so
Mm,
essentially that was a big problem. People, chain developers specifically, wanted to experiment with newer execution environments like Move and even something like Solana for VM, for example, and so on. But it's very hard. Like, if you're not into the chain building process, you don't know how incredibly hard bootstrapping a validator set is, how to kind of create a new token, ensure the token has enough value. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes around, and if you kind of can give this solution to developers, like, they're very happy for it. Second thing is, the way the blockchain industry has evolved is that it's a very tribalistic L1 sort of evolution,
yeah.
and every successful L1 wants to say that eventually all the users will end up on that L1. But, like, taking an analogy, it's not an exact analogy, but I like to give this, is that, like, if you look at apps on the internet do not live on one big supercomputer, right? Like, they are on separate servers and they scale independently based on demand. So the apps on the internet are basically
Well said.
comprised
Yeah.
of, yeah,
Well said.
thousands and millions of, like, servers and microservices. And I don't anticipate why blockchain evolution would be any different. Like, I don't think any one single blockchain will be able to absorb demand from the entire world. Like, when we are not even mainstream yet, and so it's very important to kind of build these sort of microservices, like trust minimized microservices, which can handle sort of demand. And I mean, essentially, this is how apps on the internet have scaled, and I think rollups are the perfect way to do this on blockchains.
Well said. I agree. I love it. My friend, we're going to take a quick break here, Anurag, and give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. That is Prime XBT. And when we get back, we are going to jump into modular blockchains. Of course, take a deep dive into Avail and jump into some of the use cases that the Avail ecosystem showcases: gaming, AI, Bitcoin L2s, DeFi wallet, and infra. Super pumped. And of course, the not super fresh, but a couple months old raise. Not too shabby, 27 mil, nicely done, led by Founders Fund and Dragonfly. All that in one sec. Right now, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends of CryptoNews.com and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love the team at Prime XBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a veteran, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to take advantage of this and fit your trading style. The promo code is CryptoNews50, and that gets you 50% off your first deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% off of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Anurag. I want to get into the sort of unification layer. This is a point that I don't know if you've coined or not per se, but in doing research for the show, this is something that you hammer home. I feel like everyone in crypto has a couple, the big dogs like yourself, each have a couple different theses or hot points, perhaps. This is one of yours. I absolutely love this. And you're big on that crypto needs a unification layer in the context of a roll-up centric future, which you just told us that is indeed the future. So I'm going to throw the ball over to your court. Why is it so important that we as a whole finally get a kick-ass unification layer and bring everyone together?
Yeah, I mean, so to answer that question, like, I mean, I'll just quickly go through the Avail architecture. So in general, like, why are we building this the entire infrastructure for of Avail for the rollup centric future is that rollups as a construct, specifically in blockchain technology, they really require access to like this base layer, which has enough data availability, throughput, and verifiability from that aspect. So, of course, Ethereum also is working on that. Ethereum just released something called proto dank sharding, which has, of course, been pretty helpful for rollups on Ethereum. But in general, their long-term roadmap is something called dank sharding, which will have increase data availability throughput, but also how Ethereum's validators can validate. But in general, involves something called data availability sampling, and this is a pretty technical technique, which like there's a bunch of things like erasure coding and what we use as KZG per normal commitments. I'll not get into all the gory details, but essentially you need to have this to kind of support rollups at like global scale. And this is what we've been doing, busy building over the last more than 3 years now. And I think Avail is the only project. Now I know Avail is the only project which has implemented data availability sampling with a validity proof based approach. And this is very similar to what Ethereum wants to do, but because Ethereum's so big now, it just it secures more than 300 $400 billion in value. Its roadmap is necessarily it takes time to upgrade, and so dank sharding will take a few years before it gets into production. But we kind of like already have something akin to that, similar with the same primitives, almost ready to go to mainnet now, with this component called Avail DA, which is the first component that we really build and which is going to mainnet pretty soon. This is particularly useful for rollups, who want to scale. So that is one thing. But like having said that, like if you already see, there's this. If you go to L2 beat, for example, there's already probably 100 rollups listed there, and as I said, that's not even a complete list. And that number we see that is going to only increase because right now we are only looking at mostly EVM rollups. So Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, ZK Sync, all of them build EVM rollups. Starkware builds a non-EVM rollup one based on Cairo, for example. But there's this bunch of other rollup teams that are building various sorts of rollups that have still in development, but will go into production in the next 6 to 12 months. And these
Gotcha.
span from Move rollups to like custom state machine rollups like Stacker, for example, Sovereign Labs, which uses Iris Zero, for example. And so essentially what you are going to see is like these hundreds and thousands of rollups that are going to come, and they don't necessarily need to be all very heavyweight as EVM rollups. They can be as simple as app specific rollups as well, for example. And so you're really going to need this scaling infrastructure for rollups, and that is what Avail DA really provides. But like going back to that apps on like the internet analogy, and the thing that we will have these thousands of and maybe millions of apps, and they need to have infrastructure that can scale independently.
Yeah.
But because we are not really rebuilding web infrastructure, we are building slightly newer technology which kind of uses those same capabilities but enhances with this with more trust minimized access, right? Like so. And so if you're kind of going to transition from like this one big L1 sort of a architecture to one with like this base layer with hundreds and thousands of rollups on top, it also creates problems from a user experience perspective, because now users now have to think about okay, they have to think about which chain to use, which RPC to switch to, how do I bridge tokens from one rollup to the other, one chain to the other, for example, and so on. So of course, from a technical angle, we certainly need to transition to this more rollup centric architecture, which is already happening. But the UX fragmentation is becoming very, very real. Like how do you handle UX where people have to switch between, let's say, 10 chains or 20 chains or 50 chains, for example? It's a bit difficult. And so then now you have to think about how do we kind of connect these rollups together or have this shared notions of validity among these rollups. And because these rollups construct is basically that they all share a DA layer, and so it's useful to build out this more high level interop layer between these rollups. And so the second component of Avail, which is called Avail Nexus, really builds on that to build this shared notion of validity between these rollups so that they can talk to each other. And once we kind of build all of this infra out, at some point in time, users should be able to access this infra without worrying about the chain infra underneath. So, for example, if a certain application is deployed on multiple chains, the users don't really need to choose between chain A or chain B. For example, they can do transactions such as, okay, I have funds. Just find out if I have funds on chain A and then buy this NFT on chain B, for example. And of course, I'm just giving a very simplistic example, but like in the future, probably give it like a year or so, crypto UX will transition to a user just specifying an intent on a wallet saying I need to buy an NFT on this chain, and the wallet will be smart enough to
Make it
figure out
happen.
where the funds are, and then
Yeah.
like everything will happen in the backend. And so we power the backend for this sort of abstraction. That is really the Nexus component that we build. And that is what we refer to as the unification, because you don't have to deal with the fragmentation of these chains. We kind of unify these chains together, the view of these chains together, so that, like users don't have to deal with this complexity. So that is what we really mean.
Yeah, well said there. We're getting a little tight for time. One thing I'd love to jump into, you guys obviously power a shitload of different sort of ecosystems within crypto, gaming, AI, Bitcoin L2s, more L2s, DeFi, wallet, infra. Hate to put you on the spot here, but which of those sort of areas tickles your fancy the most? Any in particular where you're like, damn, this is really cool. A lot of really cool shit's being built on or with this area of crypto. Any of those get you going?
So of course, I mean, we are pretty neutral, credibly neutral infra. So of course, we don't pick any favorites. But in general, I think what is happening is like what are blockchains really useful for, right? Like I mean, essentially, economic and social coordination is something that any sort of rails are useful for, right? Like I mean, so what do you do with a Visa or a MasterCard or a banking rail or anything like that, right? Like you use that to socially coordinate with people, economically coordinate with people.
Yeah.
And in general, what blockchains or crypto really allows us to have these more trust minimized rails, and but also, like these also allow global coordination. Like so it's not always easy to have these pieces of siloed infra work with each other, right? Like if you do a cross-border transfer from the US to China, for example, it goes through like probably 5 or 6 ledgers, right? Like see, essentially all of these are ledgers. In the traditional world is made up of ledgers. It's just that these ledgers are owned by so many different intermediaries that so one ledger has to talk to another ledger, for example, and so on. So there's a lot of friction there. Of course it has become much better, like technology has become much better. So it's today it's you can do like a e-commerce transaction sitting in the US. You can buy some stuff from Alibaba in China, for example, and expect those goods to be shipped. And but what crypto or blockchains really bring to this picture is, like they remove this multiple set of ledgers, right? Like you just have like probably the notion of one ledger which anyone in the world can tap into. And that's why you see a lot of people plugging into, like things like DeFi, things like gaming, for example, and so on. And so, of course, bunch of things to be very excited upon. But in general, where I see most promise is in combining these elements, these traditional elements with more blockchain, crypto sort of rails sort of a behavior. So, for example, to give you an example, right? Like today when you I was looking at this gift card experience in Southeast Asia. Like you can now send a gift card. Like it's not a gift card per se, you can actually gift a coffee, for example, to a friend, for example, right? Like so these mini transactions, for example, right? Like I mean, where people didn't used to think that a financial transaction would have required, for example. And so there are many of these, right? Like I mean, let's say in gaming, for example, it's incredibly hard for a game to accept transactions from multiple countries, for example. And so
Yeah, it's a
there
shit
are a
show.
bunch of things like that, right? Like
Yeah.
for an apps if you want to get listed on the App Store and you want to kind of take subscriptions, there's a 30%, like a fee that an Apple or a Google takes, for example, and so on. So basically, the thing is, it might sound simple, but these are very impactful use cases that a lot of projects are now beginning to kind of tackle beyond the usual use cases, like what we see generally being talked about in gaming, DeFi. There are these smaller use cases that are flying under the radar, probably because there's no token and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
general, they serve a real need, right? Like, and so I think those are the things that will get people started, but these will have users in very huge numbers. So anything that pushes those actual real world usage from an user perspective, I think we are very bullish on.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Before we let you go, what are you guys up to? What is Avail up to over the next couple months? Any big bits of news, releases, software updates? What are you guys shipping? What are you guys cooking and grooving with over the next couple months?
Yeah, so we've finished our final incentivized testnet. We also did our airdrop few weeks ago, for example, and we are just gearing up for the Avail DA mainnet launch. So that's what the team has been working on primarily. We are also very bullish on releasing the Avail Nexus version, first MVP version, which will showcase this abstraction of chains or the unification element by connecting a Polygon ZK EVM chain with a ZK Sync chain, so that users are able to kind of do cross-chain transactions on these chains for now. So yeah, I mean, primarily that. Of course, there's a lot of other bunch of stuff, but this is something we are very excited on.
Nice. And before you leave us today, and this has been a treat, I know we barely scratched the surface, but before you leave us today, we also have to announce, of course, the raise. You guys raised 27 million back on February 26th, led by Founders Fund and Dragonfly to accelerate the unification of Web3. Huge shout out to you and the team. Well deserved by some of the biggest names in the space as well. No surprise there. Before you let us go, Anurag, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and Avail online and on socials?
I answer on Twitter DM, so that's where I'm the most active. My Twitter handle is Anurag Arjun, so ANURAGARJUN, and you can find Avail on Avail Project on Twitter. The website is also availproject.org, and in general, you can DM on Avail Project as well if you want to get in touch.
Amazing. And as always, we will include everything in the notes there. Anurag, appreciate your time, my man. Great episode. Can't wait for round 2. Wishing you and the team all the best, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, man. Really enjoyed it.
Folks, what an episode with Anurag Arjun, co-founder of Avail, of course, co-founder of Matic / Polygon as well. We touched a little bit of everything: scaling Ethereum, the future of L2s, rollups, why crypto needs a unification layer, modular blockchains, L1s as tribes, some Web3 infrastructure, and of course, a little bit more as well. A huge shout out to Anurag and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to the team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. Eustace, you were the man as always. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.